Speaker. I rise today as a proud member of this parliament and of the mighty Electrical Trades Union, a union that does represent workers and has represented me for most of my working life and will continue to do so. I'm to contribute to this debate on the Industrial Relations and Other Legislation Amendment Bill 2022. I'd like to start by expressing thanks to my friend and colleague Linda Lavarch. Linda's a legend in my part of the world and in many others, I'm sure, as a former member for Koowanbar and former Queensland Attorney-General, among other accolades. Linda is also the co-author, with former Queensland Industrial Relations Commissioner John Thompson, of the 5-year review of Queensland Industrial Relations Act 2016, and I thank them both for that body of work. Their report and our government's response was released in February this year, and I'm pleased to say we've accepted all of the review's recommendations, 36 in full and 4 in principle, which has led us here today, Acting Deputy Speaker, to a bill that will strengthen the protection of workers covered by Queensland's Industrial Relations Act by bringing our employment standards into line with the equivalent national employment standards under the Fair Work Act. This bill will also update our collective bargaining framework in Queensland and better protect and empower independent courier drivers in our state. Acting Deputy Speaker, I hear a lot about acting courier drivers from all members here. I use them a lot too, but I mostly get car parts, and I want to make sure they get a fair go and get paid properly. Acting Deputy Speaker, importantly, this is a bill that will clear up any confusion about who can legitimately represent workers in Queensland's Industrial Relations Court. And there is clearly a lot of confusion on the other side of the chamber about this, so I'll be focusing on that today. I want to start by saying we're not changing the laws around registered organisations that operate under the Industrial Relations Act, i.e. trade unions. Organisations that can lawfully exercise a right of entry and represent workers in industrial matters that come before the Queensland Industrial Relations Court, and organisations that are subject to regulatory requirements to ensure accountability and transparency. None of that will change. So what's the difference between real trade unions and red unions? For starters, Acting Deputy Speaker, the business-like model of the red unions mean they aren't compelled to explain where membership fees go. They don't have to be clear about their business structure, and they're not. It seems they don't even have to be sure who their secretaries and treasurers are. It's hard work keeping up with all the different names they've called themselves over the years, as has been highlighted by the member for Redlands and others in that document. I don't know, it looked like a spider web to me. It was pretty scary. As I've said in this parliament before, Acting Deputy Speaker, collectivism's been around since records began. We've heard a lot of history, people talking about history of unions, but I've previously mentioned, I think, the biblical figure Moses took the first union action in having his people withdraw their labour and leave the work site. So we go back a long way there. Collectivism is taking action to achieve better working conditions for workers, and before we had unions, we had friendly societies made up of workers coming together for support to protect each other and push for change. They were recognised in the UK Parliament in the 1800s. In Australia, we can also trace back the origins of unions to the early 1800s, a movement that's over decades has fought and won the 8-hour working day, minimum wages and conditions, equal pay, superannuation, among other great achievements. It was our unions who fought against the dangers of asbestos and to later get compensation for affected workers. And I remember a former Prime Minister talking about Bernie Banton, a dying man, and saying he wasn't honest, a dying man. That was despicable. It was our unions who fought for entitlements to be paid to Ansett workers when the airline collapsed. It was our unions who fought against the work choices through the All Rights at Work campaign. I don't have time to mention the myriad of ways to which the old ruling classes, oppressive employers, business associations and governments seeking to protect the interests of these groups have tried to thwart the advancement of Australian workers over the years, from slavery to mass sackings, sabotaging collective bargaining conventions, just a couple of examples. The international longshoremen I met over in America, they shot them. They called it Bloody Thursday. They shot them for taking action, and if that's offensive, I withdraw. I'm proud to stand here today as a member of the mighty Electrical Trades Union, a real union registered in Queensland in 1917. I'm an electrician by trade. No one knows that. Surprised to all. I hope members opposite care about the safety of electricians like I do. I know my unions. I've heard some disgusting remarks from those opposite about my union over the time I've been in here, and I sometimes wonder if they really care about electricians, and I've got feelings. Hey? I'll take that interjection from the member Kawana and decline his offer. I'm proud to speak to this bill, which addresses the newest way the anti-union movement's found to undermine worker protections by creating fake unions. To be a union in Queensland, that is, a registered industrial association representing employees or employers, you must apply to the Industrial Relations Commission for registration and meet certain conditions, including that the association seeking registration isn't competing with an existing registered organisation to which relevant workers may conveniently belong. The so-called red unions, and we know who I'm talking about, do not meet this test as they seek to draw away workers from the conveniently belong rule. And they seek to draw workers away from the Queensland Nurses and Midwives Union of Employees, registered in 1921, the Teachers Union of Employees, 1917, and the Independent Education Union of Employees, 1980 they were registered in. Acting Deputy Speaker, unions are about bringing workers together to get better outcomes and protections, and our IR system is about maintaining industrial harmony. We're not about divisiveness and competitiveness, as we've seen from the red unions. And you won't hear any of the unions that I've mentioned refer to health workers as duds, I'll just say that. And unions grow from the ground up, Acting Deputy Speaker, while the red unions are more reminiscent of Pauline Hanson and Clive Palmer's style. Get a few people together, call yourself a political party, or in this case a union, and then go touting for members. Acting Deputy Speaker, unions are about representing workers, informing them about their rights, not tricking them into believing they're protected, as we've seen from the red unions. And I'll just quote some bits from the NPAC website. The Nurses Professional Association of Queensland is an employee union which fights to protect you, not promote a political party, they say. Every membership dollar supports you, your workplace issues, provides professional indemnity insurance and legal backup for you. You get better service for half the price, end quote. Acting Deputy Speaker, this is dangerously misleading, which was proved last year when NPAC couldn't represent its own member in the Queensland Industrial Relations Court because it wasn't a union. So they say they can, but they can't. In fact, the QIRC found, and I quote from Vice President O'Connor's decision, in my view, the NPAC is not a trade union. NPAC's legal personality and corporate status are inconsistent with that of a typical trade union, and its history is not in any sense typical of a trade union, end quote. And to claim they aren't political, well, please, come on. These fake unions have done little else but attack our government since their formation, and in my opinion, you could play 5 degrees or less of separation between the LNP and the executive members of those red unions, so-called red unions. And for all that I've heard here during this debate about, oh, Labor and the unions, they're together, well, the unions formed the Labor Party. No one makes any secret of that. In fact, I'll say to some of those opposite who seem to be mystified by that, go up to the electorate of Gregory and have a look through with the member for Gregory, because he explained the history of the Labor Party and the unions. He seems to get it. You guys should, sorry, through you, Speaker, the LNP opposition should caucus and actually get their story straight on the history of Labor and the unions. I'm very supportive of the introduction of penalties for the misrepresentation of an organisation's registration status under the Industrial Relations Act. I support the proposed review mechanism under the Associations Incorporation Act to ensure applications for incorporation are not granted if it's reasonable to believe that the association could then be mistaken for an organisation under the IR Act. It's a shame when we have to spend time clarifying laws for the small percentage of people who do the wrong thing. Yet here we are, Acting Deputy Speaker. I'm all about accountability. I'm all about protecting workers. I 100% support real trade unions and always will. That's why I'm voting for this bill. I commend this bill to the House.
Deputy Speaker. I call a member for Burleigh.